Hey y'all, we are back with chapter 20, the big 2-0 of the Abarat, and this is called The World Through Borrowed Eyes. Enjoy. Of one thing, Candy was absolutely certain. There was no sight on Earth to equal the view from the top of the colossal head of the Yebedin Day. Wherever she looked from that height, windswept platform, she saw wonders. She had help, of course. Not only did she have Samuel Hastrom Klepp V by her side to point things out, and to occasionally catch hold of her arm when a particularly strong gust of wind threatened to carry her over the edge of the great head. He had also supplied two very accommodating squid, which clung to their heads, and then so positioned their boneless bodies that their eyes, which were immensely strong, could be used as telescopic lenses. Klepp's squids were his pets. One he had called Squub, and the other Squiller. At first, Candy found it a little odd to be wearing a living creature, but she supposed it was like any animal that worked with a human companion. A horse, a dog, a trained rat. It was just one more reminder that she was not in Chicken Town. "If you want to get closer to something," Klepp said to Candy, "just say, 'A little closer, if you don't mind, Squiller,' or 'A little farther away, if you don't mind, Squiller.' It's important you be precise and polite in the way that you speak to them. They're very particular about the little courtesies." Excuse me. Candy didn't have any difficulty getting the trick of this, and after only a minute or two, Squiller had made himself so much at home on her head that it was of no more peculiar than wearing a hat than had been left in a box of fish for a few days. Certainly Squiller appeared to be eager to give Candy the best possible view of the Abarat. Half the time she didn't even need to ask him to alter his focus. He seemed to know what she wanted instinctively, as though he was reading the brain waves coming off her skull. Candy didn't entirely discount the possibility. She'd read back at home that squids showed extraordinary means of communicating with one another. How much more likely was it that the equivalent species here would be blessed with some miraculous power? The whole world was filled with magic. At least, that was the impression Klepp gave her as he named the islands of the archipelago and spoke of the miracles they contained. "Every island is a different hour of the day," he began by saying, "and on each island you'll find all the things that our hearts and souls and minds and imaginations connect with that hour. Look there." He pointed towards a place not far from the Straits of Dusk. "You see that island wreathed in light and color?" Candy saw it. The cloud rose in a rolling spiral around what looked to be a vast mountain, or perhaps a tower of gargantuan size. "What is it?" Candy asked Klepp. "The 25th hour," he replied. "Sometimes called Odom Spire. It's a place of mysteries and dreams." "Who lives there?" "That's one of those mysteries. Though I have heard the name Phantomaya associated with it, I have no idea what it means. Picture!" This must be Squib or Squiller. Probably Squiller. Candy's new squiddy friend Squiller did his best to focus on the clouds around Odom Spire, but for some reason the billowing spiral prevented her closer scrutiny. "If you're looking for a glimpse of what's on the other side of the cloud," Klepp said, "don't bother. The light plays tricks with the eyes, somehow, and you just can't get a good grip on it. Then sometimes the clouds will part and give you the illusion that you're going to see something. But you never do?" "Not to my knowledge." "So what would happen if you sailed a ship right into the clouds?" "Oh, people have certainly tried that," Klepp said. "A few came out alive, but happily crazy, and of course completely incapable of describing anything they'd seen, while the rest didn't come out at all." "You guessed it. One of them was my father." He let this information hang in the air for a moment, and then he said, "You look cold, my dear." "It's just the wind." "Let me get you a jacket." No, I'm all right." "I insist," Klepp said. "I don't want you getting pneumonia. I'll be back in a moment." He headed for the elevator. Candy didn't protest. The wind was a lot chillier than she'd expected it to be. "You stay away from that edge now," Samuel said, and pulling the elevator gate closed, he disappeared from sight. While he was gone, Candy and Squiller kept up their perusal of the islands. Samuel had named them all for her several times, and Candy now tested her memory by putting the names to the locations. Some she remembered easily, others she had to puzzle over for a while. The island to the west of the Yebadim Day was called Qualm Ha, and its red-roofed city was called Tasmagor. Yes, that was it, Tasmagor. To the southeast of it was a mountainous island called Spake, which stood at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 11 o'clock was the island of Nully, and at 12 noon the island of Yazil, which was bathed in the warmest, most magical light imaginable. At 1 o'clock was either Orlando's Cap or Hobarucus. She couldn't remember. At 2, conversely, was either Hobarucus or Orlando's Cap. To the south-southeast lay another sun-drenched island, which was the place, she remembered, where Samuel had said life was supposed to have begun, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, also called the Nonce. At 4 was Nom Nom. At 5, an island called Soma Plume, in the center of which was a vast ziggurat. At 6, far to the east of the Yebadim Day, though separated by only 2 hours, was an island called Babylonium, where it looked as though life was fun all the time. There were several huge circus tents pitched in the middle of the island, and colored lights in their tens of thousands flickered in the branches of every tree. I have to go there, Candy thought to herself. To the north of Babylonium was an island the name of which she could not remember, though she remembered the name of the still active volcano at its center, which was Mount Galigali. The tide of the evening then wound around the archipelago, ending up where she was standing, at 8 in the evening, looking down on the Straits of Dusk. And then in the vicinity of the Yebadim Day lay a second series of islands. At 9 in the evening was a place called Hap's Vault. She'd asked Samuel who Hap was, and he told her he didn't remember. At 10 in the evening lay the island of Ninnyhammer, which had on it a town occupied by a species called tarry cats. The town was called Highslatter. The name of the island at 11 had skipped her mind, but she remembered the name of the Midnight Isle, Gorgasium. It's the most terrifying place in all the lands, Samuel Klepp had said. Avoid it at all costs. There were 6 pyramids, some large, some small. At 1 in the morning, which was called Xukzu, and at 2, another island wreathed in darkness, the name of which escaped her. Next door to it, however, lay the island that was the most attractive to her eye, despite all that Samuel had said about its architect. The island was called Pion, and covering it from one end to the other, and so bright with light that it couldn't have mattered that it was the middle of night there, was Mexico City. The towers and domes of Mexico City were completely unlike anything Candy had ever seen before. Huge and elaborate configurations that looked as though they'd been conjured from a geometry that didn't exist back home, and then raised in defiance of physics. By contrast, the islands beside it was an ominous place, with an impenetrable-looking mountain range. It was called the Isle of the Black Egg, and it was one of the outer islands, she remembered, along with Speckle Frew, which was at 5 in the morning. Beside Speckle Frew were the 2 islands joined by the Gilholy Bridge that stood at 6 and 7 in the morning. That left only Obadiah at 8 in the morning, and she'd come full circle to the little sunlit city of Tasmagor, perched on the eastern flanks of Qualm Ha. "You're looking rather pleased with yourself," said Klepp, as he emerged from the elevator. In his hand he had a light green jacket, covered with small bright red designs. She accepted it gratefully and put it on. "I was just trying to remember the islands," she told him as she pulled the collar of the jacket up. "There were a few I couldn't remember, but I think I've made quite a good—" She stopped talking. A terrible look had appeared on Klepp's face. His eyes had grown huge, and he was no longer looking at Candy, but instead he was staring past her into the sky high above her left shoulder. "What is it?" she said, almost scared to turn, but turning anyway. "Run!" he yelled. She heard him, but her feet failed to obey. She was too astonished and appalled at the sight that filled the sky behind her. there was a moth swooping down on her, a moth with the wingspan of a small plane, and mounted on the back of this stupendous and terrifying insect was her old pursuer, Mendelssohn Shape. "There you are," he yelled at her. And now, finally, Candy's feet agreed to obey her panic. She started to run toward the elevator where Samuel Klepp was waiting to grab her and pull her up to safety. But even as she ran, some instinct deep in her gut told her she wasn't going to make it. The moth was coming down too fast. She could feel the freezing rush of its wings against her back, so fierce it almost threw her over. As she stumbled, the moth's immense and many-jointed legs closed around her body and plucked her up off the roof of the tower. "Got you!" she heard Shape yelling triumphantly. Then he spoke some incomprehensible order to his mount, and the moth beat its vast wings and rose up into the air. Candy caught a smeared glimpse of Klepp's horrified face as he reached up to try and snatch her out of the grip of the moth, but he was inches short of catching her hand. Then she was carried up and away, over the edge of the great head of the Yebadim Day. She was terrified. Her heart became like a drum, thumping in her chest and in her head. A trickle of sweat ran down her spine. Poor Squiller was still attached to her face, clinging now more fiercely than ever. Candy was cautiously thankful for his presence. Curiously thankful for his presence. It was like having a good luck talisman. As long as Squiller was with her, she felt she would survive whatever lay ahead. Moving tentatively so as not to alarm the moth, she was now hundreds of feet above the water of the Sea of Isabella. To be dropped from such a great height would certainly bring her adventures in the Abarat to a quick end. She put her hand up to stroke the squid. "It's going to be all right," she murmured to the trembling creature. "I promise I won't let anything happen to you." It helped her to have another life beside her own to protect in this terrible situation. She had made a promise to Squiller. Now it was up to her to make good on that promise and bring them both through the adventures ahead alive, however dangerous the journey became and however terrible the destination. And that is the end of chapter 20. I hope you like it. I want a squid that I can see through like binoculars. That would be really cool. And I think it would make me pretty popular. I hope you like that chapter. I hope you are enjoying the show. And I can't wait to see you next time beside the fire. So enjoy the Abarat and have a great day.